Weddings are supposed to be the happiest day of your life. Or at least, that's what every cheesy rom-com and bridal magazine will tell you. Spoiler alert, they're lying. I should know. I'm Jessica Caldwell, and I spent 6 months planning what was supposed to be the perfect wedding. The venue? An estate so picturesque it belonged on the cover of Elegant Living. The dress? Hand-stitched lace, custom-made, and worth more than my car. The groom? Ben, my college sweetheart and supposedly the love of my life. And the ceremony? Let's just say it didn't go as planned. It started when she walked in. You'd think I'd notice if a guest decided to show up to a wedding wearing black, because who does that? But I was too busy standing at the altar, glowing like some human embodiment of Pinterest perfection. Everyone was looking at me, as they should have been. Except for Ben. Ben's gaze wasn't on me. It was locked on her. She wasn't part of the wedding party. She wasn't even on the guest list. She strolled into the back of the room like she owned the place, her black dress hugging her curves a little too perfectly, her lips painted the kind of red that screamed trouble. I told myself it was nothing. Some random +1 who didn't get the memo about wearing pastels. But then Ben's jaw tightened, his knuckles whitening around the bouquet in his hands. Ben, I whispered through my perfect, teeth-clenched smile. Who is she? No one, he said, far too quickly. Right. Because normal people always look like they've seen a ghost when no one walks in. The ceremony ended without a hitch, at least outwardly. The vows were said, the rings exchanged, and the applause from our friends and family was deafening. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. And then came the reception. If weddings are the perfect blend of romance and chaos, the reception is where the cracks start to show. Between dodging Aunt Linda's drunken karaoke and managing a cake that nearly toppled over, I was already stretched thin. So when I saw Ben slip out of the ballroom and head toward the terrace, I followed him. That's when I saw her again. The woman in black. She was leaning casually against the railing, a glass of champagne in hand. Ben was standing too close, his posture stiff, his expression strained. I stayed in the shadows, close enough to hear but far enough to stay unnoticed. Why are you here? Ben hissed. Her lips curled into a smirk. You didn't think I'd just disappear, did you? I told you it's over, he said, his voice low but urgent. Oh, I know, she said, swirling her champagne. But it turns out, I don't like being someone's dirty little secret. Funny how that works. I froze, my stomach twisting. Dirty little secret? Ben glanced around, his eyes darting nervously. Keep your voice down, he snapped. She took a step closer, her tone mocking. Relax, lover boy. I'm not here to ruin your wedding. Well, not completely. At that point, I'd heard enough. I stepped out from the shadows, my heels clicking against the stone tiles. Both their heads snapped toward me, their expressions a perfect blend of panic, Ben, and smug satisfaction, her. Jessica, Ben stammered. Jessica, the woman echoed, raising her glass in a mock toast. Lovely to meet you. I crossed my arms, my smile razor-sharp. And you are? Oh, I'm no one, she said sweetly, throwing Ben's earlier words back at him. Just the woman your fiancé thought he could keep in the dark. If looks could kill, Ben would have dropped dead right there. Jessica, it's not what it looks like, he started, but I held up a hand. Save it, Ben. You're not exactly the picture of innocence right now. The woman chuckled, clearly enjoying the chaos. Well, this is fun, she said, finishing her champagne. But I think my work here is done. She set the empty glass on the railing, turned on her sky-high heels, and walked away, leaving me standing there with my brand-new husband and the taste of betrayal already burning in my throat. And that's how I found out my wedding wasn't just a ceremony. It was the opening act of a disaster. You'd think the most dramatic part of a wedding would be the bouquet toss or the cake cutting. Turns out, it's actually when a woman in a black dress interrupts your evening to present an intimate photo of herself and your new husband. It happened during the reception. The music was playing, the guests were laughing, and I was doing my best to pretend everything was fine. But then Ben disappeared again, and I knew where he'd gone. She was waiting for him near the bar, her black dress a stark contrast to the pastel decorations I'd agonized over for months. I watched from across the room as she leaned in close, her red lips curling into a smile that made my stomach churn. Enough was enough. I marched over, my heels clicking sharply against the floor, and interrupted whatever secret conversation they were having. "Ben," I said, my voice sweet but cold. "Are you going to introduce me to your friend?" The woman turned to me, her smile widening. "Oh, we've already met." "Sort of." "Jessica, this isn't the time," Ben said, his face pale. "Oh, I think it's the perfect time," she said, reaching into her purse. "After all, honesty is the foundation of any good marriage, right?" She pulled out a photograph, holding it out like a winning hand in a poker game. "Here," she said, her tone dripping with faux sweetness. "You should see this." I hesitated, my breath catching in my throat as I stared at the photo. It was Ben. And her. They were in a dimly lit hotel room, sitting on the edge of a bed. His tie was undone, his shirt slightly wrinkled, and she was wearing nothing but a silk robe that barely covered her. His arm was around her waist, his face tilted toward hers, their foreheads nearly touching. It wasn't just intimate, it was damning. My hands trembled as I took the photo, my heart pounding in my chest. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. Ben tried to grab the photo, but I pulled it away. "Jessica, it's not what it looks like." "Really?" I snapped, my voice rising. "Because it looks like my husband's been having an affair with someone who apparently doesn't understand the concept of boundaries." "Ah, thanks for noticing," the woman said with a smirk. "But don't blame me. He's the one who kept coming back." Ben's face turned red. "Stop it," he hissed at her. "No, Ben," I said, stepping between them. "I want to hear what she has to say. Clearly, you're not going to tell me the truth." She raised an eyebrow, clearly enjoying the show. "All right. Where do you want me to start? The first time? The second? Or maybe that weekend getaway where he promised he'd finally leave you?" My stomach turned, and for a moment, I thought I might be sick. "Jessica, she's lying," Ben said, his voice desperate. "This isn't what you think. She's just trying to cause trouble." "Trouble?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Trouble would have been spilling wine on my dress. "This is an entirely new level of disaster, Ben." The woman chuckled, pulling another photo from her purse. "Oh, and in case you're wondering, this wasn't a one-time thing." She handed me the second photo. This one was worse. They were in the same hotel room, but this time, Ben was shirtless, lying on the bed with a lazy grin, while she sat beside him, running her fingers through his hair. I felt the walls closing in, my perfect wedding unraveling in front of my eyes. "Jessica," Ben said, reaching for me. "Please, let me explain." "Don't touch me," I snapped, stepping back. "How long, Ben? How long has this been going on?" He stammered, his gaze darting between me and the woman. "It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You're in a bed with her, Ben. How the hell does that not mean anything?" The woman shrugged, looking almost bored. "For what it's worth, he's not great at apologizing either." That was it. The final straw. I shoved the photos into Ben's chest and turned to face the woman. "Congratulations," I said, my voice icy. "You've ruined a perfectly good wedding. I hope you're proud of yourself." She tilted her head, her smile fading slightly. "It wasn't about ruining your wedding. It was about getting the truth out. You deserve to know." "Oh, how noble of you," I said with mock gratitude. "Next time, try therapy instead of a public spectacle." With that, I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving both of them standing there. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing: this was far from over. I was halfway to the bridal suite, my heart racing and my hands trembling with rage, when I heard the click of heels behind me. "Jessica," she called out, her tone smooth and saccharine, like she wasn't the walking embodiment of chaos. I spun around, ready to tell her exactly where she could shove her photos, but she was already there, striding toward me with the confidence of someone who knew she'd won. Her black dress clung to her like it was mocking the purity of my wedding gown, and her smug smirk made my blood boil. "What do you want?" I snapped, crossing my arms. She tilted her head, like a cat toying with a mouse. "Oh, come on. Don't act so surprised. You had to know something was up with Ben. Men like him always leave breadcrumbs." I stared at her, incredulous. "You just ruined my wedding, and now you're here to give me relationship advice? Are you serious?" Her smirk widened. "It's not advice. It's an observation. You're angry at me, but I'm not the one who broke your vows before you even said them." "That's rich," I shot back. Coming from the woman who had no problem sneaking around with a man she knew was engaged. She shrugged, unbothered. "He didn't exactly mention the whole engaged part at first. And by the time I found out, well," she paused, her eyes flicking to the sparkling diamond on my finger. "Let's just say, he wasn't exactly acting like a taken man." "Wow," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "And that makes it okay? You're disgusting." Her expression didn't falter. If anything, she looked amused. "Disgusting, maybe. But honest. Can you say the same for your precious Ben?" I opened my mouth to fire back, but she stepped closer, cutting me off. "Look," she said, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper. "I didn't come here to steal him back, if that's what you're worried about. Trust me, sweetheart, I'm done with him." "Then why are you here?" I demanded, my voice shaking with barely contained fury. "To tell you the truth," she said simply. "Because let's face it, you weren't going to get it from him." And honestly, she glanced me up and down, her smirk returning. "I wanted to see if the woman he chose over me was worth all the lies." My jaw dropped. "Are you kidding me right now?" "Nope," she said, popping the pea like a schoolgirl gossiping with her friends. "Don't get me wrong, you're gorgeous. But you've got this whole perfect little wife thing going on, and I can't help but wonder how long that act will last." I stepped forward, my hands curling into fists at my sides. "I don't know who you think you are, but you need to leave. Now." She held up her hands in mock surrender, her smirk never fading. "Relax, Jessica. I'm already on my way out. I just wanted to make sure you got the full picture before you walked into a marriage built on lies." "You're unbelievable," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "And you're naive," she shot back, her tone cutting. "But don't worry, sweetheart. Consider this my wedding gift to you, the truth. Use it wisely." With that, she turned on her heel and sauntered away, her black dress swishing behind her like a battle flag. I stood there, shaking with fury, watching her go. Part of me wanted to run after her and slap that smug look off her face. But the other part, the one that hated how right she might be, kept me rooted to the spot. Because the truth was, she'd planted a seed of doubt. And I wasn't sure if it would ever go away. The reception was still in full swing when I reappeared, but I may as well have walked onto a battlefield. The lights twinkled, the band played, and my guests laughed and danced as if my entire world hadn't just been turned upside down. Ben was near the bar, his tie loosened, a drink in his hand. He looked up as I approached, his face a mix of guilt and panic. I didn't slow down. "Jessica," he started, his voice low, as though he thought whispering would make this less humiliating. "Don't," I said sharply, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward a quiet corner. "We're talking. Now." He followed reluctantly, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. When we were far enough from prying eyes, I turned to him, my voice trembling with anger. "Start talking," I demanded. "Jess, listen," he began, his hands raised as if to calm me. "This isn't what it looks like." "Oh, really?" I said, crossing my arms. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been sneaking around with a woman who just crashed our wedding to tell me all about it." He flinched. It was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless mistake. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. A mistake? That's the best you've got? Do you think I'm an idiot, Ben? Because she sure seems to think so. She's lying, he said quickly. She's just trying to ruin this for us. For you. Oh, I'm sure she's a saint, I said with heavy sarcasm. But she had photos, Ben. Intimate photos. Are you seriously going to stand here and tell me those were fake? He looked away, his jaw tightening. That was all the answer I needed. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I couldn't think straight, couldn't even breathe properly. The weight of everything pressed down on me, the photos, her smug words, Ben's pathetic excuses. I kept replaying it all in my head, over and over, until I couldn't take it anymore. So, I did what any rational bride would do. I grabbed the microphone. The band stopped playing mid-song, the sound of feedback cutting through the room as I stepped onto the stage. All eyes turned to me, a sea of confused, smiling faces. I took a deep breath, gripping the mic tightly. "Hi, everyone," I began, forcing a smile. My voice wavered, but I kept going. "Thank you all for coming tonight. It really means a lot to me, or at least, it did about an hour ago." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. Ben, who had just returned to the ballroom, froze in the doorway. "I just wanted to take a moment to share some news," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "Because, as it turns out, my brand new husband here has been keeping a little secret from me. Actually, not so little." The room fell silent. You could have heard a pin drop. "Ben," I said, turning to him, "do you want to tell them, or should I?" His face went pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "All right, I'll do it," I said, my tone sharp. "Turns out, Ben here has been seeing someone else. A lovely woman in a black dress, for those of you who haven't met her yet." Gasps erupted from the crowd, followed by whispers. Ben stepped forward, his hands raised in a desperate plea. "Jessica, stop," he said, his voice shaking. "Please, don't do this. Don't do this." I repeated, laughing bitterly. "Oh, I think we're way past that." As the whispers grew louder, another voice broke through the chaos. "Jessica, wait." I turned to see Ben's best man, Mike, standing near the front of the crowd. He looked uncomfortable, but there was a determined set to his jaw. "What, Mike?" I snapped. "You want to defend him too?" "No," Mike said, his voice steady. "I want to tell you the truth. Because he's not going to." Ben's head whipped around, his face a mix of anger and panic. "Mike, don't." But Mike ignored him, stepping forward. "I tried to stop him," he said, looking directly at me. "I told him this was going to blow up in his face. But he didn't listen. He never listens." "Mike, shut up!" Ben shouted, his voice cracking. The room erupted into chaos. Guests murmured, some glaring at Ben, others glancing at me with pity. "Jessica," Mike continued, his voice rising above the noise, "you deserve better than this. Better than him." I stood there, the microphone still in my hand, my chest tight with a mix of fury and heartbreak. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run. But instead, I looked at Ben, my perfect, charming, lying fiancé, and made the easiest decision of my life. "This wedding is over," I said, my voice echoing through the hall. Then, I dropped the mic and walked out. Let him explain that to the guests. The sound of the microphone hitting the floor echoed through the hall, but I didn't look back. My heels clicked against the marble as I walked out of the ballroom, past the stunned faces of my friends and family. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I knew one thing for certain: I needed to get out of there. Outside, the air was crisp and cool, a stark contrast to the suffocating heat of the reception. I made my way to the parking lot, my wedding dress trailing behind me like a ghost of the life I thought I was starting. I barely made it to the edge of the lot before I heard the familiar click of heels behind me. Jessica. Of course, it was her. I turned, my hands clenched into fists, to find the woman in black striding toward me like she had every right to be there. Her smug expression was firmly in place, and her tone was as infuriatingly casual as ever. "Walking out of your own wedding," she said, shaking her head with mock sympathy. "That's a bold move." I glared at her, my voice low and icy. "What do you want? Haven't you done enough?" She raised an eyebrow, clearly unfazed by my anger. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Are you serious right now?" I snapped, my voice rising. "You ruined my wedding, humiliated me in front of everyone I care about, and now you want to play the concerned friend?" She shrugged, her smirk never wavering. "I told you, I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it to expose him. You deserve the truth." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "The truth? The truth is, you couldn't stand being ignored, so you decided to blow up my life to make yourself feel better." Her smile faltered for the first time, but she recovered quickly. "Look, I'm not saying I'm the hero here. But I'm not the villain either. That would be Ben. Don't you dare say his name to me," I said through gritted teeth. She sighed, crossing her arms. "You can hate me all you want, Jessica. I don't blame you. But one day, you'll realize I did you a favor. Because men like him don't change." I stared at her, my chest heaving with anger and heartbreak. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to tell her she was wrong, that Ben wasn't the monster she made him out to be. But the other part? The part that remembered the photos, the lies, the way he'd panicked when she walked into the room? That part wasn't so sure. "Why did you even come here?" I asked finally, my voice quieter now. Her expression softened, just slightly. "Because I was tired of being the other woman," she said simply. And I figured, if I wasn't going to get a happy ending, neither was he. I shook my head, laughing bitterly. "Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted." "Did I?" she said, tilting her head. "Because you're free now, Jessica. You can walk away from him and start over." "Me? I still have to live with what I did." For a moment, her words hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. I hated her, everything about her, but for the first time, I saw the cracks in her armor. Beneath the smugness, there was regret. Before I could say anything else, the door to the ballroom slammed open, and Ben came running out. "Jessica," he shouted, his voice desperate. I turned to him, my anger reigniting. "Go back inside, Ben. It's over." "No," he said, shaking his head. "I can fix this. I can fix us." "Us?" I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "There is no us, Ben. You destroyed that the second you let her into your life." "She didn't mean anything," he said, his voice cracking. "Stop saying that." I shouted. "You think that makes it better? That she didn't mean anything? You lied to me, Ben. Over and over again. You let me believe we had a future, and all the while, you were sneaking around with her." He flinched but didn't back down. "Jessica, please. I love you. I'll do anything to make this right." I stared at him, my chest tight with a mix of fury and heartbreak. And then I turned to the woman in black, who was watching the whole exchange with a strange expression, like she wanted to gloat but didn't have the energy. "You're welcome to him," I said to her, my voice cold. Her eyes widened, and for once, she didn't have a snappy comeback. Without another word, I turned and walked away. Ben called after me, but I didn't stop. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just kept walking, my wedding dress dragging through the gravel, a stark reminder of the life I was leaving behind. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing: I wasn't coming back. And for the first time that night, I felt free. The first thing I did when I left the wedding was rip off the veil. It fluttered to the ground like some symbolic shedding of my old life, but all I could think was how tight my chest felt, like I'd been holding my breath for hours. I didn't cry. Not yet. I was too numb to cry. Instead, I walked aimlessly, the sound of my heels clicking against the pavement, my wedding dress dragging behind me like the remnants of a battle I'd barely survived. I ended up at a nearby hotel. The concierge raised an eyebrow at my appearance, probably the smeared makeup and the 1,000-yard stare, but she didn't ask questions. She just handed me a room key and wished me a good evening, like it wasn't obvious my life was currently falling apart. The next morning, I sat in the small, sterile room, staring at my wedding dress draped over the back of a chair. The once pristine fabric was now wrinkled and streaked with dirt, but it wasn't the dress I hated. It was the memory of what it was supposed to represent. My phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand, calls, texts, voicemails from Ben, friends, family. I didn't bother reading them. I knew what they'd say: it's all a misunderstanding, give him a chance to explain, don't let one mistake ruin your life. But it wasn't just one mistake. It was an entire web of lies, unraveling in front of me like a slow-motion car crash. The knock at the door startled me. For a second, I thought it might be Ben, but when I opened it, there she was. The woman in black. She looked far less smug than she had the night before, though the trace of her signature confidence still lingered. "Jessica," she said, leaning casually against the doorframe. "Can I come in?" I folded my arms. "Why would I let you do that?" "Because you have questions," she said simply. "And I'm the only one who can answer them." For a moment, I considered slamming the door in her face. But curiosity, or maybe masochism, got the better of me. I stepped aside, letting her in. She sat on the edge of the chair, her hands resting delicately in her lap like she wasn't the living embodiment of my ruined wedding. "I'm not here to cause more trouble," she began. "I just wanted to explain." I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall. "Go on, then. Explain why you thought crashing my wedding was the best way to handle this." She sighed, her confidence faltering just slightly. "Look, I didn't want to hurt you. But I was tired of being a secret. Tired of letting him walk away without consequences. And ruining my wedding was your solution?" I shot back. "You could have sent an email." Her lips quirked into a faint, humorless smile. "Would you have believed me if I had?" I didn't answer. She took a deep breath, her gaze steady. "I'm not proud of what happened between me and Ben. It wasn't supposed to go as far as it did. But he lied to me, Jessica. Just like he lied to you. Then why come after me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why not just leave us alone?" "Because you deserve to know," she said, her voice firm. "You deserve the chance to make a choice with all the facts." I stared at her, my chest tight with a mix of anger and something I didn't want to name. Regret? Understanding? "Congratulations," I said finally, my tone cold. "You've had your moment of truth. Now, please leave." She hesitated, then stood, smoothing her dress. "For what it's worth, I really am sorry. I didn't come here to destroy your life, Jessica. I just wanted him to face what he'd done." "Yeah," I said bitterly. "Great job with that." She paused at the door, glancing back at me. "You're free now, you know. Free to find something better. Someone better." And with that, she left. The following weeks were a blur. I ignored Ben's calls and blocked him on everything. My friends were divided, some offering their support, others trying to defend him. I shut them all out. Eventually, I packed my things and left town. Months later, I found myself in a new city, sitting in a bustling cafe with my sketchpad. The hum of conversation surrounded me, warm and comforting. I doodled absent-mindedly, the first designs for a project at my new job, and for the first time in ages, I felt light. It wasn't easy, starting over. Some nights were still sleepless, and the ghost of what could have been lingered in the corners of my mind. But it was a ghost, not a shadow. Across the city, in a dimly lit apartment, Ben sat alone, a glass of scotch in hand. He stared at the old wedding photos still saved on his phone, unable to bring himself to delete them. One photo, in particular, haunted him, me, standing at the door of the ballroom, my eyes full of fury and heartbreak. He would never admit it out loud, but he knew, he'd lost the best thing he'd ever had. As for the woman in black, she disappeared, just as mysteriously as she had appeared. No one knew where she went, and honestly, I didn't care. All I cared about was the future. Because for the first time, I wasn't tied to someone else's lies. Subscribe to never miss a new story and discover even more captivating tales.